Hello, Biz Catalyst 360 and Northern Lights Publishing welcome you to RoundTable 360 with your host and moderator, Joseph Carabas. RoundTable 360 brings together people in the creative fields, dancers, thespians, poets, actors, musicians, authors, and others from across the globe in conversation about things that are relevant, irrelevant, serious, and fun. Today's session is creativity, the fight against normal. Ever since the second half of the 19th century, educational institutions and the world in general has pursued the normal. To what degree does this preoccupation with normality interfere with the appreciation of human potential? Do creative differences in the pursuit of novelty make our world better? Today's discussion is led by psychologist, scriptwriter, and poet Ken Weene. Today's guests include mystery, thriller, and cozy author Donna Houston Murray, editor, publisher, award-winning poet Clarabelle Murray Fields, and a host of others. Stay with us and enjoy. Hello, everyone, and welcome to RoundTable 360. Today, we are going to be honored by having Ken Weene, scriptwriter, playwright, and international bon vivant, sharing with us. So I'm going to turn it over to Ken right out get-go. Go for it, Ken.
Hi, you left out my earlier career as a shrink, a psychologist. And
I left out your one as a pole dancer.
Well, that's true too. But, you know, ever since the accident and the pole is still in there, we don't talk about that. But as a shrink, one of the things I had to learn how to do was educational testing and IQ testing, and also giving people calling people nasty names that we call diagnoses. And so I became very early on familiar with this notion of divergence and neurodivergence and normal, the normal curve, the bell curve. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the wonderful world of statistics, there's this curve that is supposed to describe everything and anything. And it was originally, the creation of Abraham de Moivre. And that was in the 1730s, and then later on, a guy named Carl Friedrich Gauss in the early 1800s. And it's supposed to describe everything. Everything's supposed to fit in this normal curve. Now, that's not so dangerous until you start talking about educating people and having a society in which people hold common views and common values. And then all of a sudden, instead of being a mathematical idea, it becomes something of a prison. It becomes the idea that you have to fit in. If you don't fit in, there's something wrong with you. And more, we worship the normal. And there's been a lot of stuff written about this. Probably, if you want a book to read, I recommend The Bell Curve by Charles Murray and Richard Herrnstein. Now, that's enough academic stuff. So I'm going to tell you a couple stories just to get an idea, because we're creatives, we're artists. I write poetry, plays, novels, all kinds of wonderful stuff. You know, all of these people on this panel tend to be very creative, wonderful people, which means that we don't fit quite so well under that bell curve. And one of my earliest heroines in the arts was a woman named Sylvia Plath. And she wrote a book called The Bell Jar. And it was really about being squished in. It's about being on exhibit. And one of her best poems is called The Applicant. And she actually wrote that poem the day her husband walked out on her. And it is a very funny, satirical poem about an interview with this man who wants to get married and making sure he gets the perfectly molded, prefabricated Stepford wife of his dreams, and that he, in turn, is the perfect person for this. Do we fit in? Now, I'm just going to tell, like I said, a couple stories. One is a guy named Stephen Wiltshire, and he was born in 1974. You probably never heard of him, but if you're into architectural art, Stephen Wiltshire is considered one of the all-time great architectural artists. See, he can look at something and draw it. If you take him up in a helicopter, take him around the city, and then take him down, he can draw the skyline for you. Perfectly. Incredible. The man's works were selling for 50 to 100,000 pounds, he's British, a pop. And the educational department in where he lived said that because he was atypical, they had to make sure he could earn a living. So they wanted to teach him how to become a line cook, an assistant cook in like a institutional cooking, where he could earn possibly 15,000 pounds a year. Okay. The other person I want, if you've never heard of, another one of my favorite people is somebody named Gillian Lynne, who was born in the 1920s, also in Britain. And if you've ever seen Cats, or Phantom of the Opera, she was the choreographer. Now, Gillian, when she was a child, she was doing very badly in school. And the story is that her mother took her to some kind of a doctor. And of course, the educators say it was a doctor of education. The psychologists say it was a psychologist. The MD say it was an MD. But she took it to somebody. And the interview went like this. The man watched Gillian, this young child, and said, "Your child doesn't have a problem. It's just that you have a dancer as a child. And so take your child to dance school and stop worrying about all of these other things." I think the list could go on, but it seems to me there is an inherent conflict between education and creativity, between producing the normal society in which people fit in properly and generating new ideas, new potential, great books, great art, whatever. And I thought maybe we could share some of our experiences as panelists, some of our experiences growing up, how we did with the educational system, and how the educational system did or did not do with us. Now, since I've been talking a lot, I've got things to share out of my life, but how about some of the other folks here? Would you like to share? Anybody? We need a hand raised. Okay. Mike, please.
I'll share two things. One, and I can't recall, I'm sorry, who I am and am not connected with here on Facebook. But I posted something on Tuesday about the fact that on Sunday, we went to see one of our granddaughters at her annual dance recital. This kid was miserable and unmanageable until, and I don't even know how it happened, but her parents enrolled her in this dance academy. And the first year she was in the academy, she studied Irish step dance. After the first year, after the first recital, or at the her first recital, she was given a scholarship, and she was invited to also be in tap and jazz dance because she was just such a natural at it, and it completely changed this child. She is very focused, very reserved, very polite. It's unbelievable. And then from my own experience, and Ken, I have to say, I wonder if some of the generalizations that we might be inclined to make in this conversation apply to public education, in which, there has to be, well, I don't know about has to be, but there is some kind of norm established. And I'm doing this like I can see your bell curve. And for whatever reason, I didn't fit it. And I had a guidance counselor in high school who told me to my face I would never go to college. I knew he was wrong. There was no point whatsoever in arguing with him. It took me 10 years after I graduated from high school to get to college, but I was starved to be there and to learn. And that was when I needed to go. It was when I was ready to go.
Mhm.
And, maybe I was a square peg or something, but I wasn't going in that round hole.
Joseph, I see your hand up, so please.
Thank you. And I'll rely on you folks to let me know when I've gone on too long. I have written about my experiences in the educational system many places, uh, and never with much favor. When I was in junior high, when I was in eighth grade, as part of a science project, I wrote what to me was a very obvious paper. Paper was on multidimensional physics. And my eighth grade science teacher decided that I either forged it or it was complete crap, because I was a mediocre. To say I was a mediocre student was an overstatement. Um, but anyway, there was no way in hell I could have written this paper, even though it was all written in longhand. I obviously copied it from somewhere. So she flunked me, and that was not unusual for me. When I was a sophomore in high school, Mrs. Hudon, I'm sorry, God love her, Mrs. Hudon, nobody was doing well in the math class, in this algebra class, so she gave us all an extra credit assignment. Everybody write a biography of a well-known mathematician. And I went to her and I said, Mrs. Hudon, I would like to write a paper. I'd like to give you a paper I wrote. I'm going to change it and edit it, and I'll give it to you. And would you mind if I do that instead of the biography? And she went, well, I'll look at it, but get it to me soon because you may have to do the biography anyways. Okay, fine. So I embellished the paper with what I had been studying, and never heard back from it. She never heard back. At this point in time, I had been invited to leave high school, which I was happy to do because I was already working at MIT at the age of 15 in Lincoln Labs, unbeknownst to my high school people. Anyway, after I graduated high school, quote unquote graduated, I had to go back and do that. Mrs. Hudon sent me my paper, and she gave me an A- on it. And she wrote on the paper, I still have it, I'm giving you an A- because of your spelling and grammar. I have never encountered ideas like this. She had given it to Miss Foley, the head of the math department, who was a PhD in mathematics. They had passed it on to university professors who were, who is this kid? What the hell's going on here? And in high school, in my yearbook, it says I am the most likely to be stacking cans at a North Country IGA.
A fitting end for a real mathematician, no?
Yeah,
One can, two can.
yeah, really. And again, I floundered. I never did well in college. I have multiple patents on what has been called a groundbreaking base technology. I've published books which have become international bestsellers, technology bestsellers. I've written college texts. I was the dean of a psychology and anthropology department, lectured internationally. And also, one time in college, I had a physics professor berate me in front of a class You will never learn this stuff. You are totally inept at this. Go away. Get out of the class. Let the rest of us learn. I published in physics, by the way, and I published in mathematics. And if you look hard enough, you can find that I created 2 fields of mathematics for the patents.
Well,
Anybody's out there listening, one more thing. If anybody's out there listening, never believe people who work hard to put you down.
amen.
You may not be in the bell curve, but believe me, you are the curve somewhere. I'll be quiet now. Thank you.
Okay, for a little bit anyway, huh? I think you kind of followed up on what Mark was saying. Is it just the educational system, or is it society as a whole? And I think, one of the things is, I'm not sure you can separate the two things, because the educational system is how we are supposedly preparing our children to become the society. So what is the responsibility of the educator? This is an interesting question. How, if you're raising your kid, how do you change it? And do you homeschool? Is homeschooling a good thing because it avoids this? Or what do you do? How do we do it? I'd love to hear other people's ideas.
Well, I guess I was good at appearing to fit into the norm. I was never diagnosed with anything, one way or the other. And I went through school. There were definitely teachers who helped me, and there were definitely teachers who knocked me down at every moment they got. And a lot of it, much like Joseph, is that they didn't understand what I was saying. I was in all the honors classes for most of my life until I chose to transfer out, because even in the honors classes, they wanted you to learn what they knew. They didn't want you to think independently. So it's like, here, go be really intelligent, but be really intelligent the way that I'm teaching you and by what I know. And so I knew how to regurgitate what they wanted to hear to get an A on my paper, whether I believed it or not. And I use the word regurgitate on purpose because to me it's like puking, like, oh, here's all these words you gave me. Now I'm going to puke them back up at you so that I get an A. Yay me. And
As long as you can follow the rules of how to regurgitate, so it makes
right. There are puking rules. And, I got 2 college degrees in 4 years. I graduated with honors in both of my degrees. And I think there might have been 1 or 2 teachers where I thought, like, hey, you're really cool. I want to learn stuff from you. Like, let's talk, let's do things, but I mean, I wasn't arrogant about it, which is why I wasn't labeled bad or deviant or any of those things. It was like, oh, well, let her speak to a point and then she needs to be quiet. And as long as I was quiet, you love puking rules. As long as I was quiet and didn't create too much of a fluff, in the classroom or with the other students or whatever, I was okay. And then I went to work in a residential treatment center, and I was 22, 23 years old, and I began to question all of like well, why do you treat kids like this? And why do you have a program like that? And why do we have these rules? And why do we have that? And that was honestly the first time that I was called out as being rude and arrogant and naive. And I was like, how am I rude, arrogant, and naive? I'm simply asking questions you don't have the answers to. You're the authority figure. If you're the authority figure, you should have answers for me, the poor little 23-year-old who's trying to learn something. So, skip skip forward to my own children, however many years later, my daughter was also very good at looking compliant and like following directions. My son, not so much, he was full of boy. Like he was really smart. He was not arrogant. He was bright, enthusiastic, and his eyes would glow. And he got in trouble all the time in school. And I'm like, got in trouble for what? Was he rude? No. Was he disrespectful? No. Did he do his work? Yes. Okay, I'm not seeing the problem. And I had to take him out of a private school because um, it was part of a church, and he thought that God thought he was bad. And he asked me at 6 years old, Mom, can I go to a church that's not can I go to a school that's not connected to a church? And I said, why, honey? He said, God thinks I'm bad. And I was like, oh my God, of course you can.
Well,
And
that's the ultimate way of the school trying to coerce.
yeah, so it took a while. I found some schools that helped him, but he still has it in his mind that being different is bad. And he's in his 20s.
I want to go on, but I want to share a quick story from when I was teaching in a public school. We had a chess club, and I was one of two advisors to the chess club. The other was one of the more established teachers in the school. And she decided that we would have one of those living chessboard things. And she picked two kids to play the game. And they were the kings and moving their other pieces around. And at the end of this, she took this one kid aside, and I was there, of course, she was angry at him. And she said, what is wrong with you? She said, you had him beat 3, 4, 5 times. Why didn't you checkmate him? And this young 13-year-old boy looks at him and says, he's my friend. If we were just playing a game of chess on the board, sure, I'd beat him. But to embarrass him in front of all of our classmates that way, I'd never do that to somebody. And she thought that this kid was totally crazy. She wanted this kid sent for counseling. So, it's also, whose values and when. Rick, you had your hand up for some time, so would you care to join in?
Well, sure. I've got nothing as dramatic to add as what's been said so far. I remember distinctly in high school the difference between what happened with me and what happened with my best friend who was at a different school. Very, very, very Mickey Mouse small story, but we were supposed to write some sort of story. It was actually supposed to be more of a nonfiction thing where we were trying to be persuasive. But rather than that, I wrote essentially a piece of flash fiction. And I wanted to see if that was going to work or not. And I believe I was a sophomore, if I'm remembering correctly. And I got an A over A, even though I didn't conform to what they said. Just by coincidence, my best friend from kindergarten, who was my age but going to the public school, did something very similar, not in coordination with me, just by coincidence. And he said when he got his paperback, the teacher wrote F because you didn't follow the rules, but I'll give you a C because I can tell you know the rules, which I thought was a real asshole thing for a teacher to do. As far as regurgitating, I understand that completely. Right before I went to college, my father told me, what you do in college is you give the professor what he wants because he has what you want. He has the ability to give you an A, and an A is your ticket to go on. Because I knew I wanted to go to law school when I was 18 years old because I knew I couldn't be a professional writer, not at 18, not at 22. Maybe when I'm in my 60s or 70s I could be, but I knew I couldn't be then. So I knew I needed to get A's to get into a good law school. So yeah, the professor said something I wanted. So my father told me, just give them what they want. You don't got to believe it. You can sucker them, you can con them, but just give them what they want. And boy, that was really, really true. If my professor at UC Berkeley was like this literally radical communist, I give him, America's terrible, socialism is great. America is full of racism and sexism and stuff like that. Not that I really believed it completely, but although a lot of that is true. And then I get an A. And, I just, what's the mind of the professor and give him what he wants because he has what you need. If you want to have that career path, to get into a top law school. The only other thing, just so you have,
Did you go to law school?
yeah, I'm a lawyer.
Okay. And did you find in law school that same value system of you have to conform? Were they expecting you to be not original, or were they expecting you to be conventional?
They're expecting you to understand the law and to give legal reasonings. Now, you can be maybe creative because as a lawyer, I've been successful being creative. You look at a set of facts and then you have to mold those facts to put it in the best position possible, for your client. Sometimes facts are totally irrelevant to your position, but they're going to make an impact with the court. A very simple example is we had a trial, consolidated trial, 15 plaintiffs. We basically lost 12 of the 15, and we only won 3. And the bad guys, of course, appealed, the verdicts against them in those 3 cases. So when I did my appellate brief, the fact that we lost 15 cases that weren't on appeal was totally irrelevant. But that's how I led off my brief, saying we tried 15 cases, we lost 12 of 15, we only won 3, and of course these idiots are appealing those 3. Just to set the right tempo for my position was their appeals were, bullshit. And
Because I think that's a question we have in our society, is to what degree does the system require us to fit in? And I think that when we get to the issue of law, that may be one of the key elements that we need to talk about when we're talking about it. Because, we've been talking about the public schools now. And Mark, I see your hand is up and has been up for a while, and I want to but you had raised the issue of the public schools. And is it just the public schools, or is it all society? So with that question hanging there, I don't know whether you were going to go back to that or you wanted to pick up something else, man.
Can I ask Rick something? I'm sorry, Mark, it pertains to what he was saying.
Sure.
Rick, is there a certain methodology when you have to get to the aha moment? And if you take a different route to that moment, is it frowned upon?
In law, no. In law, whatever works for the defendants, lying and misleading and misrepresenting facts works for them. And for me, the aha moment I always try to do is show that the other side is lying to the court. The other side is just misleading the court. The other side says this case represents this position, but if you read the next paragraph in that case, it has all the exceptions which apply to my case. So what I do as a lawyer is for my aha moment is, hey, these other side just lied to you. This other side's misleading you. Does that answer your question? Or come close? I hope.
Thank you. Mark, back to you, man.
Thank you. First, just a quick anecdote in response to what Rick was saying. As the late blooming college student I was, I had the opportunity to study with a gentleman named Professor Leonard Mannheim. Professor Mannheim had graduated from Columbia Law in 1929 and decided his timing was really bad. So he stayed and got a PhD in comparative literature. But the course I took with him was called Persuading and Convincing. And it was a composition course that he had designed to be pre-law. And I learned as much or more about writing and writing sound arguments from that as anything else. And I'll also add, Professor Mannheim was 83 at the time. And I ended up befriending him. And one day I went to visit him at his apartment. And I asked him how he could stay so vital and active at his age. And he said, oh, I do exactly the same thing now that I've done for my whole life. Every time I feel the urge to exercise, I just lie down till it goes away. But I did want to come back, Ken, to the public education system. And you, in responding to Rick, used the term system. So in my mind, it becomes a numbers game. So the bigger systems get, the more bureaucratic they become. And then they sort of systematize or institutionalize expectations. And they have to whatever extent, standardize, especially as they become more bureaucratic. So I just want to share one more thing about one of our grandsons. He will be 13 in December. He's absolutely brilliant. I mean, the things that this kid knows and can talk about absolutely boggles my mind. They happen to live in Wake Forest, North Carolina now. But before they moved down there, my grandson's name is Evan. They had Evan in public school. And my son and his wife were being frequently invited to come to the school for conferences in which the teacher said, it looks like Evan is just like checked out to some extent. And my son Sean's questions always were, A, is it apparently inhibiting his ability to learn in any way? And they would say no. And then Sean would ask, okay, is he interfering with anyone else's ability to learn? And the answer to that would be no. So when they moved to North Carolina, they enrolled their kids in a non-denominational, Christian-based private school. And the standards are completely different there. And everybody was much more willing to understand Evan and to accept the fact that it may not look like he's paying attention all the time, but he gets all A's and makes honors every quarter. So they don't care how he learns. And they don't have to try to standardize him or fit him somewhere on a curve. The last time I was down there to visit, I said something about running a marathon. And Evan, out of nowhere, explained to me the derivation of the term and the name of the Greek messenger who had run from Marathon to Athens to report the fact that the Greeks had won this battle. And I'm like, dude, how in the world do you know that? And he said, I think I heard it in school. So it just, and I don't mean to sound like I'm bashing the public education system, but it's the nature of that beast to have to do what it's doing.
But is it just education, or is it in the entirety of the system? How we expect people to live is my question. Because I think it does go beyond just the education. I think it does include, how we expect people to comport themselves, how we expect people to walk down the streets even. And so I don't want to limit it just to the school system.
Okay, well, I will add, and I don't mean to be monopolizing anything here, but I think there's a very troublesome relationship between contemporary parenting and what some contemporary parents, in what I'll say at the risk of sounding judgmental, in abdicating their responsibilities, are expecting the public school systems to do. And that's just ridiculous.
Okay. That's another whole topic, I think.
Well, but I think it pertains to your point about how people live their lives and conduct themselves walking down the street. I mean, if people aren't being taught fundamental respect and courtesy at home, they're not getting it in public school, nor should they be expected to.
Donna, I see your hand's been up for a while, and we do want to get everybody included. Please.
Hi. Thanks. My education was at public, and as I've said before, I knew I wanted to write mysteries when I was 10. There are no classes in public school that are going to teach you how to do that. So I just took the courses I thought I wanted and needed to make a living because I didn't think writing was going to pay, and I got that part right. But yeah, they didn't help me get into college. When I went to college, they kept saying, oh, you can't do that, the courses I chose. And the dean said, yes, you can, you're paying for it. I got good grades all the time. The one class in college that was for creative writing, the professor spent an hour on the word orange in a haiku, and I wanted to strangle him. So I really just learned to type basically in school and had to learn my craft any other way I could. And since we're disclosing things, I got a Lifetime Achievement Award from my high school. I'm one of 10 people who have done that. So I had to go my own way. But
And it wasn't in
I
typing.
got, still type really well.
But that wasn't your Lifetime Achievement Award for typing.
No.
Joseph, I see your hand up, but Clarabelle, you haven't added anything, and I wanted to invite you if you had something you wanted to say before I call on Joseph.
Yeah, definitely. I appreciate that, Ken. So as I was listening, I was kind of going over my own memories from my time in education, high school, undergrad, grad school, and I really relate a lot to what Amy and Rick were saying about a lot of my undergrad experience felt like a performative game where it was a means to an end, a lot of rote memorization, a lot of jumping through hoops, where I felt like I was just doing these actions because I knew I needed to get an A, or I wanted to get an A and I needed to play the game to get it at the end of the semester. And honestly, I didn't feel like I got a lot out of my undergrad education because it was all standardized tests, a lot of performance, a lot of memorization. You know, you cram for your semester, you forget it, start over, rinse and repeat. Grad school felt a little bit different. That was a little better, where I felt like I was encouraged to engage more deeply with material because I was writing deeper research papers that were more self-guided. But the gem for me of my educational experience was I had one humanities teacher when I was in high school that I credit him with a lot of my later creative endeavors, because he encouraged me to just write. He was also a poet, and he taught me history and he taught English courses at different points in my high school. But he encouraged me to just write, just explore, just go wherever your creativity wants to take you. And he felt a lot more like a friend, you know, somebody who would just take my hand and be like, yeah, if that's what you're passionate about, write a short story about it. If that's what you want to research, yeah, research it. Send me a story, send me a poem. And I think what made a big difference for him, notably, was that he had a background in Waldorf and Montessori education, which I know is more focused on creativity and autonomy. I'm sure it's not perfect, but much more so perhaps than the pressure for standardization that you might find in public education. So that was very much resonant in my experience with education. Public education, I went to a big public university for undergrad, and it was just all memorize, rinse, repeat, memorize, rinse, repeat. I don't remember anything, honestly, from undergrad, but I still remember those high school projects that I did with that teacher because he encouraged me to just create, just embrace the joy, like the childlike wonder of the world. So I imagine a lot of creative-oriented people have also had a similar experience.
I think it's very interesting I wanted to go back to something Mark said because we haven't talked about his individual style and how it comes afoul. And you were talking about your grandson, Mark. And personally, uh, our son, and I put that in quotes, so those of you who know me know why, he is not a reader. He's somewhat dyslexic. And very early on, this became the regular calls from the school. And it started out with, well, why are you acting up every time in reading class in this woman's class in fourth grade? He says, because she insists on us reading aloud. He says, I don't mind going up to her desk and reading with her, but in reading in front of everybody else, I'm embarrassed because I don't read well. So I get in trouble. So she sends me down to the principal's office. So I went and had a talk with the principal who said, well, I tell you what, instead of getting in trouble, why don't you just come down, tell the teacher you're coming down here. And if I'm free, I'll work with you when you're reading. And if I'm not free, you'll sit with my secretary in color. And David said, oh, okay, that's a good solution. So ever after that, we realized, okay, this is not going to be the route. At 13, he asked my wife to teach him how to use a camera and how to develop film. And that has been his career ever since. He's got Emmys, he's an award-winning videographer, he's got an international reputation for his work. And people have said, he's a genius. But it would have been so easy to have him pigeonholed. And I think that's the concern, is we don't want people who have skills to be pigeonholed, potential to be pushed down. And Joseph, you had something you wanted to say, and
yeah, for what it's worth, one of the things that's coming out, I think, in the conversation is public versus private, non-public. In my opinion, something we can debate, the purpose of public education is to create quote unquote productive members of society, i.e., their job is to shove people into that bell curve. Their job is to make people fit. Originally, in the United States, the educational system was designed to make factory workers, really, to give you the ability. You had to be able to know how to add so that you knew what the weights were and the tear was when you were shipping stuff. You had to be able to write your name on your checks. You had to be able to, write down what the orders were. That was it. And my parents' generation, they were so proud if they got out of high school. They graduated 12th grade. They were like, whoa, this is the big, granted, they were immigrants and they had trouble with the language, but my dad's big thing was, I'm good. I'm an American. Sure you are, Par. Non-public education, radically different. And I think this goes what to Mark was saying and somewhat to what Amy was saying. Their job is to make people successful. Not productive members of society, but successful. Are you happy with what you're doing? Are you engaged? Do you love getting up in the morning and whatever? I don't care. I remember this guy, David, I won't share his last name, in high school. He was as miserable as I was. He took a very different route. He became a forest ranger. Last I heard, he's somewhere in the Pacific Northwest. And, he's loving it. I haven't been in touch with him in years, but the last time I was in touch, he's like, this is what I wanted all my life. And it took me 15 years to find a college that would give me the education that I wanted so I could be with the trees. Whoa, good for you. What are you doing, Joseph? But it's that kind of thing, that the sheer difference between productive member of society, we need you to fit in because we need workers. And I think this applies even through STEM education. science, technology, whatever, mathematics, engineering and mathematics. It was originally there to allow the United States to keep up with those evil people overseas. And non-traditional, non-public education, be successful. I know more people who went the non-public route who are happy in whatever they're doing than people who went the public route. And thank you for listening.
Okay. I'm going to sort of disagree with you a little bit here, Joseph. First of all, I have to tell you that I went to one of the oldest boarding schools in the country. And then, and it's a different bell curve. It isn't that there's not a bell curve. It isn't that you're not being pushed into it. It's a different bell curve. And the bell curve that I was being educated for was the Ivy League, MIT, Stanford. And literally, when I was graduating high school, I wanted to go to a small college called Haverford. I had my reasons. Today, it would probably have been Middlebury. And I was told, no, you can't. We won't send them your transcript. Here are the schools you can go to. You can go to Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Stanford, and MIT. Those are the only 5 schools we will send your transcript to. Okay. Crazy as it sounds, different bell curve. But it's still just as, hey, you're a specimen. You're going into the the other thing is that you Farmer knew something about public education that I think you don't realize, which was the major defense for creating public education in this country. And of course, Horace Mann, who is from your part of the world, was a big push behind it, was to make people citizens. The idea was, how do we make a homogeneous political society in which everybody can serve on a jury and everybody can vote? Well, everybody, of course, being male and white at that point. But so public education started out to be not just to be a good worker, but you also had to be a good citizen. The bell curve, the shaping was going on there very early on. Amy, you have something you want to add?
Yeah, I think some of this is generational, and some of it also is really just who we've encountered individually. I was actually a teacher in a Montessori school, and it was such a nice experience growing up in public schools, to go in and go like, hey, here's this thing I'm going to do. And people were like, go for it. But one of the best teachers I ever had was my public high school history teacher. She actually, I don't know if you guys remember it, she looked like the puppet madam, and she talked that fast, and she taught that fast, and she could actually write faster than she was speaking, which was kind of unheard of. She had the most amazing history outlines that connected all of world history instead of European history went here and American history went here and African history went here. And it's like she tied it all together and she spoke. And when she spoke, it just, everything made sense. And I thought, well, why can't other history teachers teach this way? So I used her a lot in my mind when I was teaching other people, especially in the Montessori school. And, but I've also had like, I knew horrendous Montessori school teachers that were like, this is the way it is. And, we're not doing it any other way. But as far as the generational thing is, when I was young, in my 20s, maybe in my 30s, I heard from everybody, just put your head down and do your work. Put your head down and do your work. I mean, that is so offensive. Put your head down and do your work. as if, you know, you can't look up, you can't speak, you can't be nice, you can't laugh. And if I did somehow bring in anything subjective rather than objective, many of my superiors were like, Amy, stop being so fluffy. And I'm like, fluffy? I'm like, you know, and I learned absolutely amazing things. Like Mark said, he learned, you know, I learned how to write very concrete, objective contracts, curriculum. Like, this is boring. You need to learn it. You need to sign it. You need to live it. But then when you go into like writing for books, writing for pleasure, you don't want that boring, objective, matter of fact stuff. You want it to be creative and fun and exciting and get all your feelings riled up. So I think it's just so much of this is so individualistic. So what I was wondering from you guys is, who has influenced you, or why did they influence you? Who sparked that little something inside you that said, go be you? Like Clarabelle, you're shaking your head. Like there was somebody who said, Clarabelle, go be Clarabelle. And Donna, there was somebody who's, I mean,
What a
you're,
wonderful question, Amy. I love that
yeah,
question.
you know, like Clarabelle's much younger than me and Donna is much older than me. Like, so I kind of feel like I'm in the middle and that I have this like wellspring of information between the older and the younger generations. Like there was somebody who came to us and said, go be you, you know, and what if we hadn't encountered that person? Would we still be us? Or would it
Mhm.
have taken longer to be there? Or, you know,
I'll
anything
answer.
like
I'll
that?
answer for me. I'll tell you who
Okay.
the greatest inspiration in my life. There are two actually. One was my fourth grade teacher who just said, "Ken, if you're smart, learn." In a world that, like, hey, learn, enjoy learning. The other was the carpenter that we had up in Maine. My parents ran summer camps, and we had this old guy. I don't know how well Harold could read or write or do anything except build buildings. But he taught me that being yourself, trying to figure out who you are and trying to figure out who you wanted to be was what was important. And I think that was the most important single lesson of my life, especially in an environment that was constantly telling me not to be who I wanted to be.
Mm.
And I'm going to add just one more thing as kind of like, if people want to add this, what is the one thing that I wish I had done as a kid to help me learn and to better appreciate the world today? I never had a garden. I always now wish we had had a garden and that I had learned how to put my hands in the dirt and grow things. Okay, so that's my answer. Everybody's got their hands up. I love it. Mark, your hand was up first, but so
So I'm going to answer Amy's question, and then I want to share something in response to what Donna said. Um, the person who absolutely changed my life in the direction of it was my first literature teacher, because he let people interpret freely. And this is going to sound ridiculous. You would have to know where I came from. And he never told me I was full of shit. So that changed everything. This is what I would want to share with Donna. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the late Harry Crews, novelist. I think he taught at University of Florida. At any rate, he wrote this in a collection of his work called Classic Crews. And he grew up in rural southern Georgia, but he wrote this. As far back as I could remember, I had longed and lusted for an unlimited supply of books. I was weary of the Sears catalog and the Bible, the only two books I had ever seen in my sharecropper's house. When I got to my first duty station in the Marine Corps and walked into the base library, it was like throwing a starving man a turkey. I did my time in the Corps with a book always in my hand. I remained convinced in my belief that all anybody needed to develop as a writer was access to a good library and the willingness to play fast and loose with his life. Because make no mistake about it, by the time a person even moderately masters any art form, it's almost always too late to do anything else.
what a great quote.
You reminded me of that, Donna. Thank you.
My goodness.
Donna, going to you. And would you care to answer Amy's question and also respond to what Mike just?
I'm gonna have to need a refresher, but what I wanted to say was John Gardner, I think I mentioned this before, said that with the arts, you can't teach anyone the arts, that sooner or later they just catch on. And that was my experience. And also, since I was 10 when I decided this, and I chose my educational path, knowing that that was still what I wanted to do. And as I got older, I realized, yeah, there are reasons why this really suits you. I like people. I like quirky little facts. I like to solve problems. I like to play with words. It all really suits me. And while we're at it, I thought we were talking about completely different things today. Artistic intent, creative intent was something that I wanted to mention. With the story, I read this story a long time ago, and there was a fisherman's wife who was on the edge of water, and she had a neighbor who was a young woman who dressed up differently every day. One day she'd be a nun, another day she'd be a pirate or a cowgirl or whatever it was, and the fisherman's wife, rightfully so, thought she was crazy. The girl, on the other hand, was looking at the fisherman's wife's life and felt sorry for her because she was living her only life. And I'm the girl. That's what I do. I interview people to find out exactly what their occupations are and how they feel about it, what their problems are, so that I can describe it to someone else and as if it was real. And that's what I do. I don't have one only life. I have a very rich imagined life, I guess is what I should say. So,
Did you follow up on Amy's
yeah.
question? Did you have,
Please remind me what that was.
yeah, did you have anyone along the line there who
Oh,
just
yes,
encouraged you
of
and
course.
inspired you?
Sorry, yes.
No,
Rick
no.
Stout, not a person, but an author. When I was 10, I was reading adult mysteries, specifically Rick Stout, and they were hard to solve and funny, and the characters were fascinating. And I thought, wow, it'd be fun to do that. And it is. So, yeah, that's what got me started. And obviously I'm stubborn enough not to have deviated from that path.
So actually, it was an author rather than a person in your life. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
That's an interesting alternative. Uh, Clarabelle, you want to join in at this point?
Sure, unless Joseph had his hand up before I did.
Oh,
If you want
I'm
to jump
sorry.
in.
I thought since Joseph has had more time,
Yes, Joseph has had more time. Go for it, Clarabelle.
playing favorites here.
Let me figure out how to lower my hand first. I always lose the button. Here we go. Okay.
Yeah,
All right. So many questions. Should I answer Amy's question
sure. And anything
first?
else you wanted to say?
Yeah, so I have to shout out that same high school teacher again if we're gonna talk about people who really shaped my path for the better. Uh, his name was Mr. Yeager. He deserves a shout out with his name. But he was so foundational just because of how non-judgmentally encouraging he was. He was unconditionally supportive of me pursuing whatever interested me, whether that was creative writing, whether that was history, research. And he never made me feel like I was stupid. He never made me feel like I didn't know what I was doing because I was young. I was 14 when you're in high school. You're young, bright-eyed. Because I'd had people who had made me feel like I didn't know what I was doing. And I remember I'd started publishing when I was 14, sending out submissions, and I had some editors say, "Oh, teenagers are too young to know the craft. Teenagers can't write. They can't write good stuff." And I never got that feeling off Mr. Yeager. He was so encouraging. He always wanted to read my work and would swap poetry with me and made me feel like I was his equal, like a creative equal. And that really gave me a lot of confidence and encouragement to keep writing, to keep submitting, to keep putting work out there. And then I had another high school teacher, my high school Latin teacher, Mr. Levesque, who also deserves a shout out because he was similarly so encouraging. And he knew that I liked to write. And so something that he would offer was, as a final project, say at the end of the semester, why don't you write a short story in Latin? And then you'll get that double experience of you're practicing your Latin and you're also working on your writing. And I saw with him, he had such a passion for learning new things. Being around him made me feel like, oh, it's safe to experiment. It's safe to try things, even if you might not be good at them. Because that is a big fear that I think holds a lot of us back, is the fear of, well, what if I fail? What if I look stupid? What if I don't get it right? And he was in his 70s, mid 70s, and he was still learning new languages. He was traveling internationally. Like, he just threw himself into life. And he seemed fearless, and I really appreciated having that example when I was so young. And then to get to Ken's question about what did I wish I had done when I was a kid, or what do I wish I had studied? I wish that I had studied music. Music is one creative area. I don't know anything. I can't keep a beat to save my life. It's like I am totally out of my element. I love music, but I am not creative in that avenue. I was so busy when I was a kid writing and drawing and reading that I didn't have the time to get to music. But maybe I can catch up now that I'm older. I think
Why not?
that would be a fun creative pursuit, I think.
I think that's a great idea. Maybe we can go around again and talk about what we're going to do next. But Joseph, I did not mean to discourage you from keeping your hand up, so please.
Thank you. Very few people can discourage me when I like to. Just one thing about something that Clara Bell was saying. I tend to find that people who say, you don't know what you're doing, say it because they don't know what you're doing. They can't understand what you're doing. And they're like, oh my God, rather than say, wow, that is freaking amazing, they're going to go, no. Anyway, inspirations. Anybody who's read my work knows my grandfather, my maternal grandfather, great inspiration, and his friends. Beyond that, Miss Graff in kindergarten, because she called my parents and said, I think Joseph can't see. And believe it or not, my parents did not know that I was blind until I was in kindergarten. Primarily because my grandfather, who was raising me, taught me to use my other senses to their full limit, which has been good and bad over time. Anyway, Miss Graff, Mrs. Hudon, who I mentioned, A.J. Budrus, the late great A.J. Budrus, who was the first person who said to me, you send me something, I will publish it. And he just was a writing mentor like it was nobody's business. And evidently, for very few people, he was very selective who he encouraged. So I thank him in all of my novels. He's in my dedications. And probably the last person in the arc, not discounting Susan, is Roger, whose real name was Obligmuch, and whose name when he taught in China was Qi Lin. Roger was one of the first people who literally watched me and said, you have got abilities you haven't even recognized yet. You don't even know yet. One extra point. As much difficulty and as much trauma as was caused to me in the educational system, I have to give it credit for one thing. And this again goes to something Clarabelle mentioned. From the time of grade school, through my parents, through teachers, through everything else, through college, I was told I couldn't understand, I would never be able to do it right, I was inferior. And that gave me the amazing ability to go into new projects saying, I'm not going to understand this. I better sit back and learn everything I can about it, which has done wonders for me because, as I mentioned earlier, patents, textbooks, published papers in, I don't know, a dozen different fields, all because I couldn't understand it. And to my credit, or to somebody's credit, regarding my trade technical books, I can't tell you the number of people who reached out to me and said, my God, this was brilliant because you actually gave it step by step. You explained it. Everyone else goes, and then a miracle happened. And even when you're doing your mathematics, every step is there. I can follow it. And you even say, if you can't follow this, do this. So again, thank you all. I'll be quiet now.
Okay. Amy, want to join in, please?
Yeah, that was actually a really good segue for, well, my next question is, so all of us were on a certain trajectory, whether we had likes or dislikes, or we were accepted or not accepted. But was there like something or someone or a moment or an event that shifted, either positive or negative, that shifted you in the right direction to go on your new trajectory? Like Clarabelle, when you turned your stuff in and you got rejected, teenagers don't know enough. Like, was that enough to make you shift? Like, did you go find somebody or something? Or did that moment, did that shift, internal shift, happen at some point in the future? Like, was it, like a long term or a certain moment or a period of your life? Because me, like I told you, I've written all kinds of things, but they were what I was told to write, what I had to write for my job, or what I had to write for school. When it came to writing something that I actually wanted to write, like it took about a year for me to go like, okay, I can do this. And it was still it was a huge process. And then when I made my very first post on social media and I got 12,000 views on it or whatever, like I was numb. I was like, oh my God, I don't even know what to do now. and it was just this, and I sat there and I said, well, I don't even know how to follow this up. And a year later is when I got an offer. I had somebody pay me to write my book, my very first book. And I was like, oh my gosh, this doesn't happen. And then I was like, but now I'm obligated to write it. So I had to actually follow through with what I had always wanted. And it only took me 52 years to get there. So that's kind of what I was wondering from you guys, was that where was the shift, the internal shift to I want to do this, to I am going to do this, I am doing this, this will happen.
Good question. Rick, I see your hand was up. I'm not sure at what point it went up, so I'm not sure which question you want to answer. But please answer them all.
Okay, well, maybe I'll try. The short answer to was there one person who influenced me? I'm not sure I can point that out, but for the inflection points in my life, or momentous things, I can certainly point out to three in my youth, or actually in my childhood. In kindergarten, I met a little boy who became my best friend for decades. And he lived right up the street. And fortunately for us, we had literally a creek in our backyard. The street went along the lines of a creek, and everybody on one side of the street had a creek in their backyard, me and him. And I guess we must have seen The Wizard of Oz by then, because we knew the word spooks. Because you remember when they go in the enchanted forest and they saying there's spooks. I am afraid of spooks. I'm afraid of spooks. So we developed our own secondary world or imaginary world where we were the frontline soldiers against an invisible spook army that rode in the sky, composed of mainly, I guess, ghosts and flying skeletons. The generals were witches on broomsticks, and using like 1984 George Orwellian doublethink, we pretended this was really true. This is really true, even though maybe deep down inside we knew it wasn't true. And we did that for at least 2 years, pretending it was true and fighting these spook wars. That was, and then uh, a very a momentous for me was my last day of the second grade. In the first grade, I was in public school, and I got all B's on my report card. In the second grade, I went to a Catholic school, and I had all C's on my report card. And if you're asking, how in the world can you remember what grades you got in the first grade and second grade, I'll tell you. The last day of second grade, I had my report card, and I'm in a carpool because there's no buses for a Catholic school. And there was some snotty little third grader who's in the carpool sitting next to me in the back seat. And I'm looking at my report card, and I'm so happy. I've got all these C's. That meant, I was good. I was good enough. I didn't get D's or F's. I was so happy. Little snotty kid looks over my shoulder and starts laughing at me. And I look at him. He's a year older than me. I go, well, what are you laughing at me for? He goes, look at you. You got all C's. Look at me. I got all A's and B's. Ha, ha, ha. That was an inflection point in my life. That was very momentous. I decided I'd never get a goddamn C again for the rest of my life. I would never do it. I would never do it. So F you.
Scrapping you.
Three-year-old, snotty kid. And so it became self-motivation. And then by the time I was in the 7th and 8th grade, it's getting to be like all A's. And an extremely momentous thing was, even though I got, A's and B's by then, I didn't really like school. You had to sit in a stupid chair for like 6 hours, waiting for the 10-minute recess in the morning, and then waiting for the 1-hour lunch recess, and then waiting for 3 or 3:30 so you can have some freedom. School was really, really, really boring. Up to the 8th grade, even in high school. But for one summer only, between the 3rd grade and 4th grade, I went to summer school. And my mom sent me to summer school to learn new math, which was being taught in public schools, but not in the Catholic school. Okay. But one of the courses you had to take, not elective, mandatory, was English. Okay. I took the English course in summer school. Guess what? It was Greek mythology. That blew me away. I was just fascinated, just overwhelmed with Greek mythology, the stories of the gods, and I would go home and tell my mom all about it. Nothing could have been more fantastic than Greek mythology. Until then, the next week, or the last 2 weeks, it was the Trojan War. I couldn't believe that. That was so incredible. And as you know, the gods were actually involved in the Trojan War. It wasn't like the movie, Troy, where it's just, humans fighting each other. The gods were actually in there themselves, interfering with everybody. I just couldn't believe that. And that was the entire thing, from the apples of discord, through the Trojan horse and the fall of Rome. Not just the Iliad, as we all know, was only 3 months in the 9th year or the 10th year, the last year of the Trojan War. And unlike Alexander the Great, my favorite Greek character was not Achilles, because he dies, even though he was the greatest. It was Odysseus, because he was the smartest, and he won. He figured out how to win the war. He was my favorite character. And then guess what? For the last week or two of summer school, guess what? It was the adventures of Odysseus. That blew me away also. My favorite character now has his own story. And after that, I would go to the library trying to find other children's versions of, the Tales of Odysseus or the Trojan War. So those were the, inflection points and really momentous things in my life, rather than an actual teacher who influenced me this way or that way. So that's my comments.
Cool. I have to say two things. One is that I don't have many memories of elementary school. You guys seem to have had elementary school. I had von Munchausen's by proxy, so I didn't get to school very often. So my life as a little kid was lived mostly in my head, which may explain some of how I come across. I don't know. Uh, the other thing is, though my favorite Greek hero is not a hero but a heroine, Penelope. Okay, because she survives. She survives in a misogynistic world of the Greek men. And boy, she's a lot smarter than her husband, even. Okay, so, well, it's funny though. I'm going to guess that each one of us in turn has an author we read, at least one, or a group of authors or a topic like mythology that we zeroed in on because we're mostly writers. I mean, even those of us who aren't only writers, we're all wordsmiths. And I'm curious, who was the writer? Okay, we know, Rick, you've already kind of responded to that. Donna, you've already. Joseph, was there a writer in your past?
A single writer. I don't. I have a very vivid memory of reading as soon as I got glasses, and never stopping. I still read. As a matter of fact, 2 books still right here on my desk. I can always read them. Several books going at once. And growing up, Doc Smith, who wrote space operas and had characters that I took on as archetypes because they were good people. It was very clear who was good and who wasn't. A lot of stories I remembered not paying attention to the authors at the time. James Blish, Mission to the Heart Stars. Whoa, I still read that periodically. Fritz Lieber, still read his stuff periodically. Heinlein. Many of the authors who bridged the golden age to the modern age of science fiction and fantasy, because at that point in time, there were clear distinctions between good and evil. So I want to be like that person. I don't want to be like that person. I want to be like that person. And that really, shaped me considerably. So, some of Harlan Ellison, not all of Harlan Ellison, but, and then we got into the TV shows, people who wrote Paladin or Have Gun Will Travel, Rifleman, The Adventures of Robin Hood with Richard Green. Those shows were really basically morality plays. So again, they were helping me understand good versus evil because my family definitely wasn't. Thank you for asking.
Okay, Clarabelle.
Yes, so I'd say there is one author in particular that was so foundational for me, and that was Ursula K. Le Guin. When I read her in high school, I felt like I had finally found a blueprint for the kind of writer that I had dreamed of being, and I just didn't know that kind of work existed yet. And I was a young teen when I first read her work, and since then, I mean, she completely shaped the writer that I ended up. Well, I can't even say that I ended up, that I still am growing into. And I keep all of her books. I don't know if I have them within reaching distance, but I keep them near me in my office. And I find that if I have a down day or a day that I feel stuck or not really very creative, I can page through it and it's a pick-me-up for me. But I love how her work is simultaneously speculative, imaginative, feminist. It's dark too and gritty in many, many places. But she was such a flash of light for me. Like when I read A Wizard of Earthsea, that was the first book I read by her. It was just like, oh my God, this is what I've always dreamed of. This is what I've always imagined, and I just didn't have the words for it yet. And then later, as I got older, then Octavia E. Butler was another sci-fi author that I discovered, Haruki Murakami, and then much later, Cormac McCarthy. I would say those are all authors that I still return to if I'm feeling low, because there is so much inspiration in their words for me.
Well, folks, if you're taking these notes on this show, you're getting quite a reading list. And I hope if you have young adults and teenagers at home who are interested in literature and books, that you're making sure that they get a copy of this list too. Donna, you want to add?
Yeah, was the second author that really influenced me was Gregory MacDonald. You know, remember I'm writing popular fiction, and he wrote Fletch. What he did, if I'm remembering right, was make you laugh on page 2 and cry on page 20, which is something I wanted to learn how to do. And I was at a symposium, and we were sailing around Manhattan at twilight, and Gregory MacDonald was on the rail staring at the Statue of Liberty by himself. So I went up to him and I said, you know, how do you make people laugh on page 2 and cry on page 20? And he stared off for a while and he said, character. And that taught me volumes. That gave me permission to give my character range. And that was what I needed to hear. So that was it.
Mark, you want to?
Another perfect segue. Thank you, Donna. When I was younger, much younger, I used to read DC comic books, so Batman, Superman. And the summer I was 10, my cousin Gary turned me on to Marvel comic books, and that actually changed everything and completely inspired me because Stan Lee's characters were three-dimensional. They were flawed. They had problems. They were troubled. And then, so that very much inspired me from the age of 10. And then in I'm going to say my mid to late 20s, I discovered Frederick Exley. And Frederick Exley's published output is pretty much limited to 3 novels. In 1968, he published A Fan's Notes. In 1978, he published Pages from a Cold Island. And in 1988, he published Last Notes from Home. And what he accomplished in Last Notes from Home and the way he wrapped up those 3 novels blew me away. And then by 1992, he had drunk himself to death. But obviously, you can tell I read much more than that. And I also just want to share, because Joseph mentioned The Rifleman. That program debuted when I was 4 years old, and it ran 5 seasons until I was 9. And I can remember saying to my father one time, how long can this actually go on? And he said, well, what do you mean? And I said, people get killed every week. I mean, how many people are there going to be who are going to show up to get killed? That's when he explained to me what television fiction was all about.
I love that. Hey, you know, you guys are making me feel awful old. I mean, you know, hey, look, when Homer was telling me the Iliad, and I'm sitting there. But seriously, I do go back earlier, and Steinbeck, Conrad, London were the 3 biggest influences when I was a kid.
Mm.
And then when I got to be a teenager, I was discovering more poetry, Dylan Thomas. But one of the greatest moments of my life is a very strange thing. I used to live on Long Island, New York, and I loved the town of Sag Harbor, which is where Steinbeck lived and wrote. And in Sag Harbor, there was a bookstore. I believe the store is still there. It was called Canio's Books. But Canio was still there then, and he had been Steinbeck's go-to guy for books to read, and they were buddies. And I was starting to write poetry, and I was getting something of a rep on Long Island for writing and performing poetry. And I stopped in at Canio's and I was talking to him, and he invited me to do a reading at his bookstore in Sag Harbor. And I was actually the last reader before Canio sold his shop.
Mm.
And to me, that memory, there are memories in our lives. And I think that's where I was picking up on. All of us have memories that have helped us to overcome however we may be different, whatever obstacles we may have been facing in life. There are events that enrich us and that allow us to reach out into our better world and our creative selves. Amy, you had something you wanted to add, and then Donna.
Yeah, I didn't want to go if I didn't have enough time, but you said there's moments, and I wrote in the thing, Nancy Wood, she's a Native American poet, and there's so much reference to nature and animals and stuff. And I remember when I had a new baby and I moved to Hawaii, and it was right before Christmas, and I was very emotional. It was the first time I had been away from my family, and obviously all the grandparents and everybody wanted the baby at home, but I was 12 hours away. But I opened the book, and it was a poem, and I wish I could remember the name of it. But anyway, it was a poem, and it described me. And it described the way that I look and the way that I walk through the woods and everything. But it was about how all the things you have to go through in life because nature knows the true message in your heart. And still now, even when I see that book or think about that book, I can go back to 1997, no, 1996. And I can still see myself standing in that store reading that book with tears pouring down my eyes because I felt like somebody actually knew who I was. And the ironic part is she was born on my birthday in a different year, and she passed away on my daughter's birthday in a different year.
Wow. I think we're just about out of time. And what a wonderful closing comment to bring us back. I didn't know where we were going to go today. I just wanted to talk about people being divergent and different. And I think somehow we've managed to do that. And folks, if you're listening, we do this once a month. The last Friday of the month, we get together here and we talk about stuff like this. And you're welcome to join us. You're welcome to reach out to us on Facebook and become part of the show, take part, because it's fun. It enriches us. Joseph, if you have something you wanted to say?
Well, I just want to make note, Donna, did you have something else you wanted to add? You had your hand up.
No, I forgot to take it down. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Yes. Yes, we are at time, folks. Fascinating session. Of course, which one of these sessions isn't fascinating? And following up on Ken's invitation, yes, these meetings are held the last Thursday of every month. And you should join us because we're a fun group. Anyway, thank you all. See you again next month. And folks, those who are watching us on YouTube or whatever, you have any ideas for a topic you'd like us to cover, please let us know, because otherwise we're boring and dull. Thank you. Take care, all. Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Bye, everyone.
everybody. Bye.
Thank you for watching Roundtable 360, where creatives from diverse fields and across the globe gather to discuss what's relevant, irrelevant, serious, and fun. Roundtable 360 is brought to you by Biz Catalyst 360 and Northern Lights Publishing. Our shows are taped the last Thursday of every month at 7:30 a.m. Hawaiian time, 10:30 a.m. Pacific time, 1:30 p.m. Eastern time, 6:30 p.m. London time, 19 hours 30 minutes Central European Standard Time, and whatever time that converts to wherever you are. Please join us at http://nlb.pub/roundtable. That address is on your screen. See you next time, and until then, stay well and safe.